So welcome to this very, very strange way of getting to know one another. I'm in my spare room, which I have strategically placed the camera so you can't see everything over to that side. Bill Steenson, master craftsman. Have you positioned yourself? Have you got a whole load of rubbish over to that side?
No, this room is reasonably tidy for once.
And Natalie, your room looks good, I have to say. It's got good stocked shelves, but is there rubbish and everything over to one side under the desk that we can't see?
I might have done a very quick sweep around the kitchen to clear up all the baking that's been going on this afternoon while I've been working.
Good, good. Well, welcome both of you to the last in our August series of Craft in Conversation. And I'm delighted to have Bill Steenson, who is co-founder of the Steensons Jewellers, with his wife Christine. We saw a fantastic photograph of you there with Christine, Bill. Well, back in the day, rocking the hipster look.
Yeah, 1976 probably.
And that was when it was all set up.
Yeah, we left college in 74 and we set up the workshop almost immediately on the basis that we decided we couldn't be any poorer in our first years of business than we were as students. It was pretty tough for probably 5 years, but it has worked. We've been very happy with how things have gone, and we've bounced around and survived business because not only are you a craftsman, but you have to be a business person and you have to think about where you're going and how you're going to get there, hopefully.
Well, we're going to talk about that. I've got you for about half an hour, and thank you to everybody who has tuned in as well. Is there another word for people joining a webinar? Tuned in seems like very radio and TV. Thank you for watching and joining us live. We will also have, you can send in questions as well, which I'll be able to see and ask questions too. And Natalie, thank you also. Natalie Melton is Creative Director of Crafts Council UK. Back in May, you launched the Market for Craft report. Now, how do we talk about a report without everybody's eyes glazing over? We will try and explore some of the key points that come out of that. But first, how did you get involved in this sector? What fired you off to take this up as a job?
I mean, throughout my career, I've worked in communications and I've always worked with creative businesses one way or another. So I've worked my way through sort of music, nightclubs, design businesses, digital businesses. And I got involved, I was working for an organisation called Arts and Business, which brought the cultural sector together, there was a branch in Northern Ireland, together with the creative sector, and we set up a mentoring project called Crafted, which was about looking at how we could better support the needs of individual craft makers by partnering them with mentors from the luxury goods sector. And the exchange of skills between those two worlds was really valuable, and that program ran for a number of years. But my time spent with craft businesses I found really enjoyable, and from that moment on I was sort of hooked, and I went on to set up a business called The New Craftsman, which represents a lot of British craft makers, and from there I moved over to the Crafts Council about 18 months ago. So it's been a journey, but you can clearly see that the interest is there. We will come to that report and we will distill it, and particularly it was a UK-wide report, but very much looking at what came out for Northern Ireland. But let's go back, Bill, to you. So you're an impoverished student with a great beard and a young wife, and your hearts are full of dreams and hopes. And on your website, there's a quote, to be innovative in design whilst producing the highest standard of craft. So was that a key mantra from the get-go?
Well, it really was, and we tried not to follow any trends. We didn't go into Celtic jewellery. We didn't go into anything that was approaching anything like Gucci or whatever. We were trying to do our own design work, and to a certain extent, how the workshop evolved wasn't discussed, but it worked out that Christina, as she preferred to be called, actually much preferred designing the production ranges. So she would design a range of, a few pairs of earrings, a few brooches, a few pendants, and then put those into production, and we'd work out how to make them and what process we're using. Whereas I tended to look after the sort of the one-off commissions, from engagement rings and wedding rings right through eventually to doing church silverware and tabernacles and processional stuff like that. And then as we took on more staff, then basically we divided the work up between the staff as to who was doing what. And, everybody did a bit of everything. Yeah. But yes, probably the first 5 years were really quite difficult, and we made very little money. But we were lucky at one point to move bank, and our bank manager basically sat us down and says, "You're what I call busy fools. If you have so much work and yet you're not making enough money, you're simply not charging enough." Okay. And that's when we put a percentage change in all the production work, and we put up our commission work quite dramatically, and nobody noticed. And the work never slowed down. And it's one of the most difficult things within the crafts world. You try to be realistic with your pricing, but you have to take account for literally what is the price of silver today. Like in this recession, in the COVID recession, silver has doubled in price. Gold has set another world record high, and it's very difficult to cope with.
Yeah.
Previously, since the banking crisis, we were much more conscious of when we got to the end of the financial year, get to the end of our financial year, October, November time, we're hitting Christmas, we would then forward purchase metals for the following year, and we would stock up on our diamonds and our rubies and stuff when the going was good, and try to basically build a stockpile. Yeah. And that got us through the crisis. In the early days, we weren't doing that. We didn't have the wherewithal, we didn't have the cash. We basically survived day by day.
But isn't that interesting, Natalie? So there you've got somebody who has a long career, and it's interesting to hear somebody who is essentially a crafts person, an artist, a designer, talking about these major crises that have hit, the banking crisis, now the COVID crisis, and having to be so aware of the price of things. And we as the purchaser, we don't think about that. We don't think about the materials. So is that something that is always going to be a stumbling block for people trying to price their work competitively?
I think Bill's original point about the bank manager sitting them down and just talking about the pricing and the lack of profitability in the business is, I just wish, that's such a fundamental lesson that so many makers need to learn earlier on in their business. It's incredibly difficult when you are doing something with real passion. Most craft makers go into business because they love what they do, and the business skills come after the passion, and sometimes the desire to kind of get your work out into the world, to sell it. Craftspeople can often be their own worst enemies in terms of how they're pricing what they're doing because they're so passionate about it. And the difficulty is that in the world that we live in currently, access to business support for micro enterprises isn't consistent, and it is hard to find the right advice where people really understand the business that you're in and can give you good, useful, practical advice. And so having somebody who's been through it and can share their experience is always incredibly valuable.
But let's talk then, Bill. Sorry to cut across you, Natalie. We'll come back. But I mean, there are people watching this who are makers and are thinking, gosh, I don't even know my bank manager, I do all my stuff remotely. Is there something about having somebody like that who has your back and who can help you through major crises, whether they be banking crisis, recessions, even things like the Belfast flag protests. I mean, that had a huge impact on your work, on the sale of your work. Can you give us some strategies, that from that boy with the beard, who hadn't quite gone grey yet, but still had that passion, but still had to become hard-nosed as a businessman?
Well, I would have to say that particular bank manager was probably the last real bank manager we had.
Yeah.
Even though our turnover is up to quite a large amount of money now and doing new business, we do not have an individual bank manager. That's a change in the banking system. That man was called Tom McCurley. Some people will know him. He was a great character. And he was actually on the board of Craftworks at the time as an advisor. But he was great, and he was very matter of fact and very, very good. I would say, and even like we've done management courses with Ledu and then with InvestNI, and I think an awful lot, very few of them are properly fine-tuned for the craft world. But I think if you want to go back to being an actual maker, I think the first thing, so many makers are one-man bands or two people as we started off. Yeah. The first thing you have to work out is how many actual hours you'll get manufacturing per week. Because you say you're going to work a 40-hour week, you never get 40 hours done. In a 40-hour week, you might spend 10 hours on the telephone or communicating with people in some way. So there's your time down. In the end of the day, you have to work out the value of your product to the manufacturing hours. Then your materials, then your overheads, your rent and your rates and whatever, and work out like that. It's very difficult. I think we got through, we opened our first retail shop in Belfast in 1988. The bank manager at the time never told us a recession was coming 6 months later. And we struggled through getting, that was in Little Victoria Street, and then we moved to Bedford Street. We struggled through that, but we did struggle, and we made it work, and it has become a great centre for us. But
how did you, can I cut across there? How did you make it work?
Hours, putting the hours in, and being very conscious of, keeping up to date with customers' inquiries and orders, and making sure as much as possible the work was all done on time. So certainly the workshop in those days was beavering away much faster and much harder than we do now, because we've got far more staff. We now have 7 full-time goldsmiths working at the bench. So I think I know we're the biggest workshop in the north of Ireland. Yeah. I don't know where we are on the All Ireland or the British thing, but we do have those people now. Even today with furloughing and such things, that's another set of problems. But yeah, in the early days, I think it was just grit and determination and putting the hours in. Let's
talk then about this report. Let's get to it, Natalie, because it makes for fascinating reading. And people can they access this? Can the general public get a sense of look? Okay, so let's once they can do that, so let's then look at sort of let's take out the key points of it, and basically what do you find? What were your main findings with this report?
So the key finding is that the market for craft, the consumer demand for craft, has grown exponentially over the last decade. So we've conducted a similar survey, although this is the first time that we've done it across the UK in partnership with nationals. And it suggests that 73% of the UK population have bought craft. That's 31.6 million people, that the market's worth more than £3 billion. And interestingly, that the fastest growing area in terms of those who are buying craft are those under 35. So
it's a young audience.
It's a young audience.
Okay.
So, I think when I first started sort of working in craft, which is probably about 13 years ago now, craft still had some negative connotations and associations. People didn't really understand what was meant by craft, and it was either, oh, it's not for me, or, oh, that's sort of bit WI. People could be quite derogatory about it, partly through lack of understanding, and that's completely changed in the last decade. And
what is that? What has been the cause of it? I mean, I know that we had Kate Malone on as our first guest here, and as well as a fantastic potter and artist and craftsperson in her own right,
and TV personality.
So she becomes the TV personality, and she's in the great pottery throwdown. Have those kind of programs, like the sewing bee and all of that, has that added to the sense of change of how we think craft is?
Yeah, absolutely, because it gives people I think ironically, digital media is both a friend and a foe to craft. It has been such a powerful medium in terms of helping makers expose their practice and share what they do. And in a world where we are increasingly digital, people are incredibly drawn towards the handmade. But most of the time, that's being able to see it through a screen-based medium in the first instance. And so there's a sort of, I suppose, a reaction against a kind of digitized world. I think a realization that we were increasingly surrounding ourselves with objects that we didn't understand how they worked, how they were made. You can't take apart an iPhone. You can't fix it if it goes wrong. It's a kind of completely closed unit. So people are sort of reaching for things that give them the opportunity to figure things out. And then alongside that, if you look at how important the sustainability agenda has become, and how important it is becoming for people to understand provenance, where things are made, how they're made, are they being made where people are being paid fairly for their work. And of course, craft, there's a very short supply chain. It's very transparent. We're talking about a lot of locally made objects. So, you can go and see a workshop. You can talk to the person who made it. You understand. You get a sense of their own kind of humanity and values.
And that's been a key part of, Bill, the strength of Steensons. So I go into the shop on Bedford Street and I look around, and I will say I'm a huge fan of the work, and I've bought a ring at the moment, and I feel that you go in and it's a very high-end looking store and everything's there, but I love the fact that they say you can also go up to the Glenarm workshop, you can go and view, and that sense of provenance that Natalie talks about, has that, I mean, that was probably part of what you and your wife wanted to do anyway. It wasn't a marketing ploy. So have you seen that we as a society have changed and come into step with craftspeople over the last 25 years or so?
They certainly have, because when we first set up, I think there was us and Graham Harron were the only two manufacturing jewellers, and people almost didn't believe that you could do it. Sort of somehow it just appeared by magic, and when you sat there, and we've always designed our workshops that you could see the people doing the work, so they could look over the counter and see us with the bench filing and banging and thumping and soldering, and that's always been part of it. And certainly the public has certainly developed a much better awareness of how things are made and appreciate the skill put into them. Now, and like what Natalie was saying about the percentage of people viewing things online, we reckon that all the engagement rings that we sell have been viewed on the website first. I would literally say 99.9%.
Mm-hmm.
Couples now use the net to suss out what they want and who they want to go and see, and then they'll come in and say, can we look at ring number 2424 and 227, blah, blah, and then we get them out of the showcase. Sometimes we have to figure out which rings that are. But yeah, it's very important, and even our new showroom here in Glenarm, which our daughter Brona is running very well for us. We have a massive glass wall between the showroom area and the workshop. So again, you can see all the people manufacturing away. And it's a valuable tool. I think it's a good educational tool for people. And it certainly has worked for us.
Natalie, let's talk a little bit more about this report. And can we drill down a little bit into Northern Ireland? Were you able to see what, or is it, shall we keep it wider, and are the same findings that are happening to a potter in Dorset, will they apply to Northern Ireland? So obviously this has come out in May, and we have all been groping, for want of a better word, our way blindly through COVID. There's been an awful lot of sourdough made and banana bread, and in a way, homemade making with our hands has happened to all of us. You know, that's been an absolute revelation that has come out of COVID. What do you feel the benefits of that have been? Have we now got, has my 12-year-old daughter now got a better appreciation of the art of making something because of this?
How much tie-dyeing's gone on in your house?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I'm glad to see the back of the banana bread, but I mean, it's been all about taking your mind off this enormous thing that none of us can process, none of us can control, and doing something. And in that has been a huge mental health awareness as well. So I wonder, can we talk a little bit about that from your own background and knowledge of the craft sector? Will that be a positive to take from this awfulness?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm a natural optimist, but I would say that the massive rise in people having a go at doing things themselves can only be a positive thing for craft as a whole. There's a very clear correlation between people who try to do craft as amateurs are much more likely to buy fine craft. They're much more likely to buy craft made by professional makers, because the minute you start to do something, you realize how damn hard it is. So the appreciation of the value is what the hurdle is sort of overcome. And so if we become a nation of tie dyers, crocheters, macrame makers, knitters, embroiderers, potters, then I think that what we will see is that the growth that we've seen over the last decade in terms of the consumption of craft will continue to grow at a similar or greater rate, because we all appreciate it so much more. And we are recognizing increasingly what the sort of mental health benefits are, the mindfulness. And as you say, it's been a very challenging time for so many of us emotionally over the last six months, that need to do something to kind of decompress, to de-stress. I think, as we all commented on how it sort of feels like we're sliding back into autumn over the last week. I think that desire will continue.
Bill, I'm sure that you look back and there must be standout moments for you when you realize that things were taking off as a business. Can you remember the first big commission or your first international commission, and how these came about?
I think maybe the larger commissions that I take pride in, more than monetary value, would be some of the work we have done for churches. We have done church silverware. I was asked to make a chalice for Archbishop Daly when he was being enthroned, or whatever the term is. And that was a fantastic honour to be asked. It was a lovely thing to make. And I enjoyed the church silverware, which we don't do now, and the workshop's not doing, because I was really the only person who had the hands-on skills to do it. We never train anybody up. But yeah, that's, I think, would be probably the most important. The only thing about that particular piece of work was that when, like, I was christened William, I've always been known as Bill, but when I was being processed down the aisle for presentation, the BBC, or whoever wrote the script, changed my name to Liam.
Okay. So forever you will be known as Liam Steenson.
Within the silversmithing circles. Yeah, there's lots of, I think it's more a case that I would say that it's not the big commissions, it's the joy in customers' eyes when you show them a piece and they're just delighted.
Yeah.
And sometimes, especially in the sort of the one-off pieces we make for people, you can do them a drawing and you give them, and even today's with CAD-CAM, we can almost show them a photograph or an image that looks like a photograph of it before we make it.
Yeah.
But they still, when they see the final piece, and just the joy in the customer's eyes is the most enjoyable bit.
Yeah.
That's the one. Yeah.
And still, you still get that still means something to you.
Oh, definitely. And to go back to what Natalie was saying about, the conversation was about other, about the development of craft within the population. Yeah. I think the Repair Shed is a fantastic program in terms of showing people bringing in things to the Repair Shed to be fixed and repaired and restored.
Yeah.
And all the different crafts people have in there. I think it's a fantastic educational tool to show people. And I think it's a slightly different tangent to a straightforward maker.
Yes.
But it's all the same skills.
Yes. Yeah.
Part of the same family.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
We've chatted about the process of creating something, and Steensons is a huge success story for people watching now or watching this later, because it's going to be up on the craftni.org website for a month now, so there will be people coming to look at it over the next month. Natalie, support. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're sitting and you're trying to get your craft out there, yes, you've got the internet. Yes, you can build up a portfolio of clients, but how do you do that? I mean, is there any help? I mean, is it post-COVID? Is there sector-specific targeted support? We were talking about maybe the Eat Out to Help Out scheme. Is there anything like that could possibly come along that would actually be focused specifically at crafts people and at the craft sector that would help?
Well, we are heading into a comprehensive spending review, and I think some of the conversation, some of the measures that will come out of that, obviously we've been lobbying quite hard for a variety of different things. One of the, just to give you a couple of examples, we've been pushing for a reduction or the removal of VAT on market stands and fair stands, so that you're immediately sort of lowering the cost of participation in events as we start to rebuild and get used to being back in a kind of real world physical world as opposed to a virtual world. So we'll wait to see whether anything comes of that. But I think that's a fairly easy measure to make, and obviously that's one of the other things that they did for the restaurant sector straight away, is reduce the VAT rate. I think we have been we are trying with our partners across the UK to develop a more coordinated export strategy for craft, and I think craftspeople are good at exporting on an individual basis. Over half of the makers that we serve surveyed in the report, in work overseas. And for the first time, we did a kind of parallel survey of consumers in the US, and the US market. There's a huge kind of untapped potential for British craft makers. Yeah. So we are talking to the DIT a lot about measures, stimulus, ways in which we can help support people to understand how to export, and ways in which we can perhaps help them with those early stages of exporting.
Bill, I mean, that's something that did you and Christina just have to kind of learn that as you went along?
Well, yes, but we made a decision when we opened the Belfast shop. We made a conscious decision to actually stop exporting and stop wholesaling. We decided that with the wholesaling, like we used to do the NEC, we did the Dublin show, we've done New York a few times, and we found that trade fairs are phenomenally expensive to do. Yeah. The stands are expensive, your hotel's always expensive. You end up preparing for it for a month before you go, so your production's down. You then go to the fair, you take your orders. It probably might be 2 months before all that work is out, and then you wait for a month to get paid. The time scale between the start and finish is phenomenal. So we decided that we were going to concentrate on the retail side, trying to sell as much of our work as we could ourselves. And our turnover went down, but our profit went way up. Obviously it's been a system that has worked well for us. And we have our 2 retailing centres. We have the Belfast shop and we have the workshop here in Glenarm, which last summer, when we had tourists, was matching sales with the Belfast shop.
You've also had the Game of Thrones fairy dust on you guys as well, which was a very, very natural fit. You guys being in Antrim in Glenarm.
We made probably at least 80% of all the jewellery on the show is made by us. So from belts to big necklaces to crowns, I made Joffrey's crown before we even knew what the programs were. And did
you watch it? Did you watch it?
I did watch it. I haven't seen the last series. We wait till it comes out cheap on DVD, and then I keep it because I want to keep a copy because our work is on it. But yes, it has been fantastic in terms of we got paid well for the work we did for the show. We then got a license from HBO to make our own Game of Thrones range, which is selling phenomenally well. And we also had people coming by not the bus load, but the minibus load and by the taxi load into the workshop in Glenarm and had the photograph taken with a crown, and they buy bits of jewellery. It's been fantastic. It was really quite incredible how that just switched off at the start of COVID and has not yet started at all,
That's a big thing, isn't it? About we're sitting here, we're talking digitally, and we're talking also, I mean, you can give advice about selling online, but there is something, isn't there, about being able to go in and handle the product, Natalie, and hear the story, talk to somebody like Bill or talk to somebody like Kate Malone and hear and feel their passion. What can be done? I'm sure we're all feeling our way through this. Is there a plan from your point of view of what can be done? Will Christmas craft fairs be open? Will people be able to go and meet local craftspeople?
I very much hope so, and we're planning on a couple of key events to try and stimulate that market and encourage people back in. So we were due to open our own gallery space the week of lockdown. So that is yet to open, but that's a beautiful gallery space, Grade 2 listed Methodist chapel. Completely refurbished, and the opening show was planned to be a sort of overview of the Crafts Council collection. Now we will run that show next year, but actually the opening show now will be a kind of an open call for the graduates of 2020 to showcase their work, and that will be a selling show. So it will be an opportunity for some of the craft graduates across the country who didn't have a chance to show their work physically, didn't get the chance to meet buyers, collectors, gallerists face to face. And we've pulled together a fantastic selection panel to look at work, and we will curate and present a show of their work. So obviously we're confident that done in the right way, we will be able to bring people back in to see that physical experience. And I think universities did a brilliant job of pulling together online shows at very short notice, but I think everybody would agree that actually it's not the same as being able to see the work up close. So we're setting out our stall and hopefully encouraging people to tentatively come back into venues by putting on a show of completely new work for a group of makers who really, really need help and support to get their careers off the ground at a really challenging time.
Yeah, you really feel for them, I know.
Yeah.
Bill, what about from your point of view? Do you feel that sort of targeted support, similar to the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, would benefit the craft makers?
I think certainly. I think we just might encourage people to come in and have a look around. I think it's more. I think the main problem at the minute, from our point of view, is the furlough scheme. The furlough scheme is brilliant and has worked very, very well. We have the staff now back in working in two bubbles. So half the manufacturing staff are in Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the other half in Thursday, Friday, Saturday. But in the end of the day, that means your actual production is still down by 50%. And that's difficult. So I think if they could reduce the rate, the VAT rate, would be fantastic. And the Arts Council do have a scheme where you can basically not subsidise, but you can basically HP works of art, which jewellery and I think some of the other crafts people are involved in, and we certainly are, which is good. I think the VAT would be the most straightforward and the easy way to assist. How they would differentiate between the ordinary retail trade, which I think the government would probably see us as, and the crafts thing, I don't know. I don't know how they would do that. That would be a very difficult one to call.
And what about you from your point of view of the likes of Christmas fairs or things like that? Do you, Bill, see, I mean, the world is emerging, but tentatively. What are your thoughts on that?
We tend to go to Christmas fairs rather than partake in them. We go as buyers. Now, I think like the last one we were at up in Derry last year, it was so packed. I just can't see how anybody will allow that number of people into the physical building anymore. So I think when you water down the crowd, and the crowd is part of the atmosphere and part of
yeah.
I think if you water down the crowd till there is definitely 2 meters between each person, I think that on itself will actually reduce the possible buying potential. I don't know. I just think I think this year is going to be phenomenally difficult. If the furlough scheme finishes as the government says it's going to do, I think an awful lot of manufacturers, even like us who are reasonably busy, could be looking at redundancies and trying to figure out how to cut your cloth, because I don't know where it's going to go, and the government doesn't know where it's going to go. Like in the recession in the 80s, the bank interest rate went up to 15%, which meant that people who were borrowing money were paying another 3 or 4% after that. Then you got to the banking crisis, and the interest rates went down and down and down. Nobody's ever explained to me why one system is better than the other, or why they choose one or the other. But they do now. Thankfully, the interest rates are very low at the minute. But and if it had been up to 18%, I think half the world would be bankrupt by now. But yeah, it's the unknown aspect of it. You know, we don't know if it's going to last 3 months, 6 months, or 3 years. That is the big, big problem. And we don't know how it's going to affect our family and our staff on a direct illness thing. It's impossible. It's far worse. Like a financial crisis, you could almost understand, you know, how the world get out of it. Yeah. This is different. This is so different that I think the government will have to extend the furlough scheme in some way. And if we could get the VAT down on, you know, manufactured goods that maybe the seller sells them directly themselves, maybe that would be a way to do it. But
Natalie, it's almost like I was going to start speaking a little bit like Liam Neeson and Taken, having a unique set of skills, but that craft makers need a unique set of skills. But now, on top of this, post-COVID, there's another set of skills that are having to be learned. I don't want to end this chat on a real downer. I mean, is there anything that you can see? Is there a chink of light at all coming out of all of this?
Yes, and I mean, that's not to say that it's not incredibly challenging, and has been incredibly challenging for an awful lot of people. But I think craft makers, by nature, are incredibly resilient, and
which is the title of this chat: the resilience in the craft sector.
And you know, and I think it's very true. They are resilient and creative, and find ways to navigate problems and challenges. And I think as a sector, it's very supportive. And there's a sort of, you know, really lovely kind of sense of mutual support from maker to maker in times of need and times of difficulty. We've been championing the Artist Support Pledge from quite early on, which is an initiative set up by an artist to help artists sort of sell work through the pandemic as galleries closed and fairs and events shut down. And the principle behind it was that artists could post work on Instagram, use the hashtag Artist Support Pledge. All the work had to be priced at under £200. But when they sold £1,000 worth of work, then they reinvested £200 back into work from the pledge. So it created a circular economy that was about mutual support. And over the course of the pandemic, we estimate that it's probably generated upwards of £40 million worth of sales. The hashtag has been used over 350,000 times. And it's created a network of artists who are supporting each other by buying each other's work. But it's created a market for a whole generation of younger buyers who are looking for unique handmade gifts at an affordable price point, but done in across a medium that they're all incredibly familiar with, Instagram. And I think, you know, things like that, where there is a sort of spirit of generosity hardwired into the commerciality of it, are ways that, for me, it points to ways in which we as kind of creatives can support each other through this crisis. You know, I do well, I share some of that with you, and I invest in your work, and that lifts you up and it makes you feel good, and you then get to invest in somebody else's. So I think things like that do feel like, you know, hopefully that there's something sort of enduring and positive that comes out of it.
Okay, well, I have one more question to ask each of you. We ask each of the contributors' guests to bring along or to show us a picture of a favourite object. Bill, what have you got for us?
Chris and I, we've always, when we did go to trade fairs, we quite often swapped things with other makers, which was a fantastic thing to do when you're doing it. And we do buy lots of ceramics and have done for many years. But this is my favourite. Can you see him?
Put it a little bit closer to the screen. Ah, okay. Who's that fella?
This is, well, he doesn't actually, I haven't named him.
Okay.
Anthony Scott ceramic piece. I love dogs, and I love this wee dog because he's got a real attitude. Like, he's really cross-faced.
Yeah.
Now, through the wars, he got knocked off a shelf. He's got 2 broken legs. Matter of fact, I think he's 4 broken legs and an ear, which I have very carefully put back together again. But I love him. He's a great wee character. And there's a few, I'm not sure if you can see it, there's another dog behind me up on the shelf.
Yes. Okay.
Well,
maybe we should call him Liam after the BBC's gaffe of calling you the wrong neighbour. Would that just annoy you further?
Good. He's missing a tooth, but I haven't quite yet.
But it's the story, and this is what always, we love about, you remember where you were, you remember who was with you, the story of how this object came into your possession.
Well, this one, Chris bought this for me, and I do love him. He's a great wee animal, and he's very well behaved.
Good. And Natalie, follow that.
Okay. So I also have ceramics. So this is a pot by a young maker called Lydia Hardwick. This is one of the pieces that I bought through the Artist Support Pledge. So I've been buying quite a lot during the pandemic, and I suppose I had COVID right at the beginning, so back in March. So the first few weeks I was laid out in bed, and it was just as the Artist Support Pledge was starting, and it was pretty much the only thing that I could focus on was just looking at all of this incredible work that was sort of appearing on Instagram and watching the whole thing sort of grow. So once I was well enough to actually be up and about and start doing some shopping, then that's what I did. So it will have the many pieces that I have bought, of which this is one, will hold a very kind of particular memory.
Yeah. The pandemic pot. Folks, thank you so much. It has been an absolute pleasure. We've actually gone a little bit longer than I had anticipated, but it has been a pleasure talking to you both, to Bill Steenson and to Natalie Melton. Thank you also to our previous guests. I chatted also to Glenn Adamson and to Kate Malone. It has been a very unusual year, particularly for the craft here in Northern Ireland, because August would be the time that everybody gets out, goes to workshops, goes to see people, swaps the stories and buys. But we will keep the recording up of this chat, and it'll be up for about a month, so do please share and let people know. It'll be on the craftni.org website. But for the moment, thank you very much, and thank you to everybody who has joined us live as well. We'll see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.